Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining. We're here today to talk about how to create a collaborative document review process. So as your hosts, I am Patrick Londa. I'm the marketing manager for our product Collaborator at SmartBear Software. And I'm joined here by Jonathan Fortunati as well.
Morning, everybody.
And John is a sales engineer for Collaborator. And for anyone who might not be familiar, we're going to quickly just talk about who SmartBear Software is and the kind of work that we do. So SmartBear, we're a leader in software quality tools for teams. We have 16 different solutions across the software development lifecycle, and our tools help teams create better software and that software faster. Whether you're trying to do a document review early on, or as we're going to talk about today, or if you're trying to do testing in an automated way or monitoring, we have solutions across the software development lifecycle that can help you do that. So we're going to take a quick look at our product portfolio just to give you a sense of what I was talking about there. So we've got Collaborator, which we're going to talk about and show a little bit today. We have Test Complete for automated UI testing, cross-browser testing. You can see what your code looks like on multiple devices. Alert Site for monitoring. We also have a suite of API products from Swagger Hub to SOAP UI Pro, and then also virtualization with our tool Service B. And integrations are really important. We're going to maybe talk a little bit about that today. But it's very important that the tools that you're using tie into whatever your existing toolkit is. So today we're going to go through. We're going to define, what is document review? What do we mean by that? And how can you communicate it amongst your team? We're going to talk about the key benefits of this. So sort of, what do you get when you standardize your process? What are the things that you're missing right now that you might not even know about? And then we're going to take a look. We're going to walk through document review and Collaborator a little bit. So show how someone might leverage Collaborator to standardize their document review across their team. And then, of course, we're going to have some time for any questions that anyone has. So first off, what do we mean by document review? So primarily what we mean here is going to be related to the software development lifecycle. So, I mean, there's all sorts of document review. If you Google it, you'll probably find something around legal documents. You can do reviews of those documents. But for our primary focus today, we're going to talk about all of those artifacts and documents that are part of the software development lifecycle. So it could be requirements, it could be user stories, test cases, deployment scripts, specifications, design documents, really anything that comes in contact with our teams as we're trying to build better software. All of that material is probably getting reviewed right now. I think the question is, do we have a standardized process for it, or is it sort of in a email thread or an Excel file, like a lot of teams sort of currently manage? So we're going to go through sort of what the standard document review workflow is. This probably shouldn't be groundbreaking to you, but I think it gives a good sense of what we should be thinking about as we go about trying to standardize a document review process, right? So you're going to have an author. He creates a new document. That could be a design document, requirement, really any document associated with your development lifecycle. And then in order for it to be a review, right, he's going to need to add participants to that review. So different reviews, require different amount of participants, different people that you want to bring in. For this, 3 people seems appropriate. So it could be something that you need to get a lot of feedback on. And then those participants are going to be looking at that document. They're going to be making comments. They're going to be marking things that need to change in order for us to complete this review. Things that we really either we can't fulfill, or that we're going to maybe go a different direction once we bring in everyone to talk and everyone to provide their feedback. And then, of course, the author is going to make changes based on that feedback. And after that process, the reviewers are going to once again evaluate the changes, say, is this sufficient? Is this what we want? And then they can finalize that review. But for this example, let's say the reviewers are evaluating the changes, and a question comes up that maybe no one had thought of in the initial participant group, and they say, oh, maybe we need to bring in a compliance person to go evaluate. Is this gonna allow us to go forward? So that person could come in. He could say, even though you provided your feedback, even though you made changes, we still need to change this. We're not doing that anymore. And that would send the workflow, back to the participants or back to the author to keep making those changes, keep iterating on that cycle until we're at a point where we say, yep, everyone agrees, all the feedback has been heard, we're ready to move forward. So that sort of iterative cycle is what makes document review, if you're able to standardize it, a really inherently agile process, because it's about doing those quick iterations, getting that feedback, making changes, and then getting everyone on the same team. And this could be a cross-functional review as well. If some of the participants are from different departments or from different teams. So a lot of teams can leverage that document review workflow to drive an agile approach overall. And then, so we have that change. It's been fixed. We're able to close out this review. We can move forward. So this is sort of the ideal process, right? You're able to bring everyone in. You identified things that need to change. We fix them. We close out the review. So the key benefits as far as regulatory compliance, this makes it really easy to say, this is who did this review. Hopefully you're able to get some reporting and metrics on that. The earlier in the process you can identify and resolve defects, that saves you time. It saves you all the hours that were dedicated towards something that that maybe we shouldn't be pursuing. So the easier or the earlier that you're able to all communicate and eliminate defects, ultimately, you're going to be saving money and not wasting as much time. And then there's sort of the inherent benefit of improved communication across the team. So that could be anything from skill sharing to just making sure that everyone's aware of what other teams are doing. And it's possible there's a solution out there that through one of these document reviews already exists. So you could find that out by bringing in those participants. And then long term, if you're able to document your document reviews, you'll be able to get some long-term visibility into what was the conversation around this change that was made a year ago. What was the thinking? And that's really difficult to do if you don't have a standardized process. So this is an example of maybe what teams do today. And this is not all teams. Some teams are using dedicated document review tools, which is really great. But a lot of the time it can look like this. You can have someone who's the author say, "Hey, I need folks to review this." So they send out an email, and one day later, nothing's happened. Maybe let's say the team member was really busy. They haven't had the time to go do that review. So the author has to send out another email saying, "Hey, really need feedback. Maybe end of the day, can we take a pass?" And they're probably a little bit more frustrated than they were initially. And then 2 days later, let's say nothing's happened. Then you end up in a situation where the review hasn't really started because no one's jumped in to make comments yet. And you have the initial author who's left frustrated and maybe unheard. So that can be the case if you're trying to coordinate all of your document reviews through email. I mean, everyone's getting hundreds of emails a day. It can be tough to keep up with peer reviews if it's sort of mixed in with the rest of your work. So some reasons why this is frustrating. So there's no formal accountability or urgency for each review. No one's really keeping track on emails of okay, this person didn't respond for this amount of time. And because of that, the process is driven by nagging. you have to constantly be reminding folks. There's no automated system for really driving that process. And what can also be the case is it can be tough to close out a review if there's no formal workflow for it. So you could get initial comments, the author can make changes, and the author can think that review is almost done. And then someone can make another comment and say, well, what about this? What about this? So ultimately, if you're not able to sort of close the loop, your review process can ultimately end up undermining confidence. You can keep having things enter the review process even after the initial window was set. In order to do reporting, it's pretty manual and slow to, or some people do it in Excel files or SharePoint. It's a lot of manual work to compile it all together. And then as I mentioned earlier, then your peer reviews are mixed in with all of your other work. It could be promotional emails, it could be just stuff that's going on in the office, and then you also have these peer reviews mixed in with everything else. So it can make it a little difficult to really prioritize and standardize your review process. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how a team would use Collaborator, which is our code and document review tool, to go engage in a document review that's a standardized process. So for anyone who's not familiar, we're just going to give a sort of a brief overview of Collaborator. So it's really the only enterprise grade pure document and code review tool that there is, which makes it specifically tailored to a software development team. That's really, they're dealing with design documents, they're dealing with requirements, but they're also trying to review code as well. So the real benefit of Collaborator, you get to standardize peer review workflows. You're able to reduce those software defects early and often. That's in code, that's in documents, and then it makes compliance a little bit easier because you have all of your reporting a little bit more automated. And then also, if you're able to drive your peer reviews in this sort of agile approach of standardized sort of tool-assisted reviews, we see most teams end up shortening their development time to market because you're able to push these reviews forward without having to do a bunch of nagging. So I'm going to actually turn it over to John, and he's going to show off a little bit of the tool and how an author might go about setting up a review.
Cool, thanks, Patrick. All right, if anybody can't hear me too well, let me know, or I guess you wouldn't be able to if you can't hear me, but I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. All right, and likewise, if you're having issues seeing my screen, let me know. I'll zoom in a bit, just in case anybody has a lower resolution monitor. I'm also going to keep the question box open, so if you have some questions about how we do doc review or peer review in general, please shoot them into the question and answer box, and I'll make sure to stop and tackle those as they come in.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's look at how we actually could use Collaborator to do a document review. Now, if you've been using Collaborator before for peer review of code, this is going to look very similar because it's actually the exact same process. The only difference is at the end, we're going to be uploading document files and using the tool to analyze document files instead of doing code files or in conjunction with.
Sure.
So the first thing I'm going to do is create my review, and the first place I want to stop on is my template. Because one of the great things about Collaborator is its flexibility and customization through templates, which are going to let me do things like grab data on my review using custom fields or apply specific role profiles to make sure that a certain number of reviewers or types of participants are added to the review. And it's also going to let me include things like checklists. For example, if I click this requirements review template here, you'll notice my screen changes a bit. And now we have this checklist over here, which is specific to this template and specific to doing a document review. These are obviously just some very basic checklist items here. Are all the requirements linked to parent objectives? Do all the requirements meet SB 2000 documentation standards, a very strict SmartBear documentation standard? Does each requirement have acceptance criteria? Something maybe you'd see a lot in an Agile Scrum team. Is everything spelled correctly? A basic thing that we want to go through while we're performing these document reviews to make sure that we're looking out for. Now, in the real world, These checklists are going to have much more useful items within them. I've seen checklists up to 50 items long that reflect maybe more strict document generation processes that perhaps a company like a defense contractor may have, where they have clients like the U.S. government that require everything be documented. So these can be really helpful to make sure that all the items that you need to have within your requirements document or test plans are actually there, and you're meeting whatever standards that you have internally, maybe just for your team, or externally if you have a customer that's requiring that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the really great things is you can set it up so that every box needs to be checked in order to move forward with a review. So if there's certain things that you care about, you're going to be able to see exactly who came in and what time they were able to check off each box and do that review.
Exactly. And then down here, we're just going to add some participants to this review. I'm going to add myself as the author. We'll add our friend Colin as my reviewer.
So quickly, that drop down, what are those roles?
Those roles there. Here, so Collaborator has the concept of 4 different roles that you can configure based on whatever permissions or requirements you have for your process. But those roles are going to be how people relate to the review. So if I'm the person that creates the review, I'm probably going to call myself the author.
Sure.
If I'm the person who's going to be performing the review, I'll call myself a reviewer. Maybe you have a different name for that. You can configure it to have a different name if you want to. If I'm someone who's maybe like a project manager and I just kind of care to see that the review is taking place, maybe I'll be added as an observer because I just care about observing the review. If I'm someone like a program manager and I maybe want to take a more heavy-handed approach to facilitating the process of a code review, maybe I'd add myself as something called a moderator, so I can facilitate that process and make sure that the review isn't completed until a certain amount of oversight has been completed. We'd see that in a more strict code review environment. But all those roles are going to work together to make sure that the review is completed, and they're going to have different levels of interest in the review. So right now I add myself as an author because I'm the person who created the review. And my intent for this is to make sure that my colleagues can see the review easily. They can leave feedback for me easily. And also I can make sure that they're notified easily. I don't want to have to go in and send them emails and say, hey, Patrick, can you please read this review for me?
Yeah, exactly.
It would be a pain. It would strain our working relationship, which would be really sad.
Yeah, of course.
So instead, I can just simply add them to my review. I'll add myself as an author. I'll add them as reviewers because I want them to check my document out. I want them to look at my requirements. And then Collaborator will take care of that for me. It'll notify them and say, hey, Colin, Patrick, you've been added to this review. Here's a link to the review. Here's the title of the review. Here's some information. Here's when it's due if you set a deadline. And then it'll do some things like automatically update them a couple days before the review's due so they can make sure that they get it done in time. Or you can poke them manually and say, hey, I haven't seen any activity. In fact, Collaborator has a little bit of logic built in that says, if we haven't seen, in this case, Colin, open up the review in a couple of days, maybe we'll send him a notification just to make sure that he's actually paying attention and got the first one.
Yeah, which is really great because then the author can, keep going about their work. They don't really have to project manage as much.
Exactly.
Collaborator is able to do that legwork for them.
Exactly. That's one of the benefits of using a tool. It kind of facilitates that process for you and lets you manage that. The great thing is I can see now I have a dashboard, so I can go to one spot and I can see everyone who's been working on my review, and I can see the status of them. Have they approved it? So over here in the state, we're both active because we haven't started doing any work on it. But as soon as Colin were to approve this review, we would see his status as approved. So I would know that Colin did something. Now, if we had multiple reviewers, maybe 5, 10, which isn't uncommon with larger dev teams, I could look at everybody and their relative activity with the review. So I don't have to sift through my emails and say, did Colin actually ever perform this review? I can see it all in one spot and easily get that high-level view.
And that sounds really great. I think a lot of teams also try to manage a lot of their projects through Jira. So how exactly does Collaborator tie in there?
That's a great question. So we have a native integration with Jira. Collaborator is pretty much designed to work with whatever third-party tool that you're using. This is one instance where we said, you know what, so many of our customers are using this specific tool, let's build something native. So if I go over here and put in a Jira ticket ID, if you aren't familiar with the Jira ticket ID, it's usually a project key, in this case collab, followed by a number, in this case 1. I'm going to select my project. In this case, my project's just called Jira for Team A, not a very descriptive project name. But I can add that link to my Jira ticket. And in Jira, that ticket will now have a link back to Collaborator. So now we have that double link. So let's say a typical thing you may see in a Scrum team. I create a story. My story has some subtasks. One of the subtasks is probably going to be verify intent of the work. Did my code changes actually create the acceptance criteria that we had originally intended to create? Did we meet the goal of the story? So we may have a task that says review the acceptance criteria. This review could include the acceptance criteria for that story, some information about those requirements, and now we have those two things linked. So maybe throughout the sprint, people are working on this task to make sure that the acceptance criteria is groomed properly or refined properly. And then we can link it to that review task so we can finally move it over, or maybe just link it to the story, however you want to link it. I'm giving a few examples here, but there's a lot of different ways to do it.
And John, we actually have a question that just came in. So the question is, does the tool have the ability for the reviewer to enter the amount of time that they spent on a review? And then part 2 of that is, does the tool have logic to make a reviewer role required?
The answer is yes to both, but for the first one, we'll actually take care of that for you. You can enter that manually if you wanted to. So you could go in and create a custom field that says time spent on review. You could create one of those for each participant on the review, and you could have them input that data manually. But in the background, Collaborator has a bunch of stopwatches and clocks that are working throughout the process to keep track of things, including not only the absolute time that the review took, but we're actually going to provide the real time that reviewers spent performing the code review. And we're going to do that by basically tracking the amount of time that a particular participant has the Diff viewer open, which is the thing that lets them see the files that they're reviewing.
Great. Yeah, no, and that makes it really easy as far as reporting goes. If you have someone who says, yeah, I took a look at that document, you actually have the sort of verification behind that of how much time that person spent actually reviewing that document.
Exactly.
And John, you mentioned the Diff viewer. Can we take a look at that?
Sure. I'm just going to answer the second question really quick. Does the tool have logic to make a reviewer role required? We can not only require a specific reviewer role, but also the number of that role that's required. So in this case, I only had to add 1 reviewer. I could make it so that 5 reviewers are required. So you have a lot of flexibility with how you configure those role profiles. Something that probably a little bit too in-depth to go into right here, any more than that, but if you want to, definitely reach out and we can set up a separate session. We'll dive into kind of that admin side configuration. But to get to your point, I will add a file to this review.
Yeah, that would probably be helpful.
So I'm going to add just a requirements document here. And you know what? Actually, I added the wrong one. I wanted to add a more simple version. Let me go back here. So add, just as a note, we support Word files, PDF files, Excels, and image files. And with the release of 11.3, we're going to include PowerPoint and Visio files as well. But what I just did was add 2 files to my review. And I'm going to add a second revision of one of those files because what I want to do is show how the Diff viewer actually compares documents. Now, in real life, I wouldn't be uploading 2 revisions of the same file probably at the same time. But again, this is just a demo to illustrate how this tool may work.
Yeah, and the drag and drop makes it really easy.
It does, and I could upload stuff manually here as well. And of course, if you're using source control for your files, we can upload through that as well.
Perfect.
So this is the Diff viewer that we were talking about. And what we're doing is we're comparing the 2 versions of the same file and highlighting what's changed. So in this case, we have a few lines that have been removed and a few lines that have been added. And this is going to help the different reviewers identify what they need to focus on. So I can see, hey, this has changed. This is the thing that requires my attention, and I don't need to read this entire document. Maybe I want to, but let me focus on this first. Prioritize my time spent so it's more effective. And And the nice thing is this is going to all be in one place. So if I'm a reviewer, I can go into here and say, you know what? I wanted this line removed. And I can add that as a defect or required action item is what I like to call it. Right there in the diff viewer. So now in one spot, I have all the changes that need to be made to this document. So I'm not chasing these down in an email thread and trying to see, all right, what do I need to change? Or I'm not hunting for different versions of a Microsoft Word document that has tracking changes enabled. I'm not sure which ones are actually the ones I'm trying to follow.
Sure.
All in one spot. If different stakeholders need to give their approval to these changes, let's say my manager needs to say, I'm glad you asked for that change, but I need to find the final approval. They can come in and they can provide that approval here to enter this discussion. So it makes it easy to keep track of everything in one spot and understand what is the status of this document and how can I change it.
Great. All right, and it does look like we have another question. Is there a way to only review the latest version instead of the difference between the two documents?
Yep, you can do that. So I could just set, up here we have this before and after drop down. I would just simply set that so that the before and after match.
And then we also have the question, does raising a defect in the diff viewer raise a JIRA ticket or just a defect within this collaborator review?
I'll answer that with not yet. It's coming. It's coming. I can't tell you when. It's a secret, but it is coming. Right now, we accomplish that by using triggers. So what we would do is we build out something called a trigger script, which is just a very simple script that calls a JIRA command that says create defect in JIRA when the defect in Collaborator is created. And that's something we could talk about in a more in-depth session outside of that, but it is possible. Will be fully natively supported, but not yet.
Okay, great.
All right. So this is the example of a document review, creating that document review. Let's look at something that's in progress and maybe a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to open up my code review in progress.
And we have another question.
Sure.
Can the tool remote link to doors for software requirements reviews, like it links to JIRA?
That's another one we're not yet. Something that is coming, but we don't have it at this moment.
Yeah, we're working hard on it though.
Yep. A little bit on the roadmap. These integrations, especially for document review, are one of the top priority items on our roadmap because we're seeing that a lot of teams want to do doc review in conjunction with their code. So things like doors integration, also different types of files, things like a MATLAB Simulink integration, reviewing models, all things that we are working to figure out what's the right one to put in the product first and how to make sense. How does that make sense in a doc review kind of world? So this is a review in progress, and this is more realistic because we have some code files. People have been actively working on it. And down here, we have our requirements document. And we can go into here, and we can scroll through our requirements document. And now we can have a history of what's changed. We can see my defect that's been resolved over here for removing a list of items. So we can see that that list has been removed between the different revisions, that the defect is resolved. So we can start resolving these defects as the work's happening. And again, I'm using the word defect because that's just what it's been called in Collaborator for as long as Collaborator's been around. But really, it's just a required action item. In this case, make this change to the document.
And on the left-hand side here, this conversation, so let's say I have a distributed team. All of this can sort of function in real time. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, so I could go over here and say, we sure do. I'll tell you what, let me pull up Firefox really quickly, open up a different session, and we'll see this in real time come through.
And we have another question that just came through.
Doing this long process.
Yeah. So does the after version identify which before version the change was made against?
Does the after version identify?
Let's see.
Would you mind clarifying that? There's a few ways that I could answer that.
Yeah, so the exact question is, does the after version identify which before version the change was made against?
So when we upload the file, if we're uploading it through a source control management system, we'll automatically pull in the previous version. I'm not sure if that's what you were
Okay,
getting at.
So does the updated doc with the changes get attached to the ongoing review cycle, or is a new review cycle created?
Okay, thank you. You're going to add that to the current review cycle. So as you add these documents, we'll keep track of all the different revisions. So you can add multiple revisions to an existing review, and then you can cycle through those different revisions up here if you wanted to. But you'll have that traceability through the different reviews. And we'll actually, when you upload a new revision, I don't know if you can see that over there, but new version uploaded, second upload, we'll keep track of those and all the comments too. So then you can see, all right, this grouping of comments was made between these two uploads. So you have that full kind of picture of what's been happening in this review.
Great. All right. So yeah, that sort of gives you a sense of, you know, how a team might all get in and collaborate on document review within Collaborator. And then, you know, obviously there's reporting that we have that John mentioned earlier. But we have reached the top of the hour. So just want to respect everyone's time. And, you know, if there's any final questions that people want to send in, you know, we're happy to address those as well. Yeah, I mean, Collaborator is really great if you have a software team that's, you know, dealing with these design documents and these requirements. They also have code reviews that they want to do. And Collaborator is really, I think, the only enterprise grade tool that allows you to build up these templates, set these rules and requirements, and really have it function as a quality gate for all of your processes. All right, so it doesn't look like we have any sort of last minute questions, but feel free to reach out to either John or I. You know, we do have a personalized demos available where we can get into the weeds on how exactly Collaborator would work for your dev team or other teams as well. Oh, all right. We have one more question actually. Can you display the reviewer login once? The reviewer login.
By that you mean, would you like me to log in as the reviewer, or?
The reviewer login. So, I mean, I think the home screen probably gives a
I see
a good sense of what an average reviewer would be seeing. Yeah, how does the dashboard of a reviewer look like?
So this would be the Collaborator home screen. It's a server client model, so what I'm doing is going to the web interface for the server. So we'll just display the user's action items over here. If we had a due date, the due date would show up over here. And then you get some simple options for creating new reviews, some news threads, which you can use to update with maybe internal company news, stuff like that. And then your options up here to go into the admin section. And one thing that we are changing with Collaborator is how we do these dashboards. So in the upcoming releases, we're going to start to see some changes with creating custom dashboards and maybe making this a little bit more flexible with what you see on your home screen. Great.
And yeah, I think the other really great thing is, you know, you can see exactly what the progress on all of these reviews are. So you know exactly what stage in the document review workflow you're at, which just makes it a little bit easier if you have a lot of peer reviews that you're trying to get through. All right, and then we have a question: how does the reviewer go about their action items?
Sure. I mean, that could be different depending on, you know, how you're using Collaborator, but in general, I would see what I see is people organize their action items based on what they have to do, what their progress is, if they're performing a review versus responding to comments, that kind of thing. And basically just go down the list. I mean, I'm assuming that they would probably prioritize things that they need to actively work on and perform against. but you can go in and you can sort these lists based on the review, the progress, who the author was. Maybe you want to hit reviews from your own team before hitting reviews from a different team, or maybe your role. In this case, I'm an author on a number of these reviews. I'm only a reviewer on one. So maybe I want to go check out the one I'm a reviewer on first before I go check on the author. Or if I had that due date column, I could filter on that due date column, and I could maybe prioritize based on which reviews due first.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can really sort of customize it to fit, what the priority is for your team. All right, great. Well, I do want to thank everyone for joining today. I hope everyone can sort of take away, if not exactly how Collaborator uses document review, how teams can start to think about their document review in a way that really tries to standardize the process. And any other questions, we're going to answer offline. But really appreciate everyone joining today.
We can answer that one really quick. That's a closed defect, and that's an open defect.
Oh, yep. We had a question on, can you show how an action item is addressed or completed? And yep, really easy. Red bugs are bad, green bugs are good. So it just gives you sort of a quick visual image as to how things are being addressed. Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. And have a great day.